So we're now working with part 2 of lesson 38, the perfect passive and present active participles. Now for the perfect passive participle, you take the fourth principal part and translate it as blanked or having been blanked. For the present active participle, take the second principal part, drop the RE, add NS. For the genitive singular, that NS is actually going to go to an NTIS, and it translates as blanking. So, present active participle, we have amo, so I'm going to drop the RE, add an S. Then for the rest of these, I'm going to switch out that NS for an NT and get ready to add my endings. Now, two things can happen here. The rules, if you recall from the previous video, for third declension adjectives, the ablative singular ends in an I. Participles can go either way. More commonly, you're going to see it as an E. They're IUM. So that's how you decline the masculine and feminine of a present active participle. To do the neuter, you would switch the ES and the ES to an IA. And nominative and accusative would look the same on the other side, so amans. The ablative singular end in an E or an I. More common though, it ends in an E. Now on the perfect passive participle side, you want the fourth principal part, and I'm just going to drop the US now because that ending can change depending on the gender. It can be a US masculine, it can be an A feminine, it can be a UM if it's neuter, and then go from there. Alright, so with this one, I'll just go masculine because that's usually default. Some practice with these guys. Here's your participle. It's a present active participle. And it's going to be modifying soldier. So we ought to help the soldier fortifying the walls. Here's our participle. It's a perfect passive participle. Modifying epistolum. The servant wants to find the letter having been written or written by the king. Our participle is here. The hindered allies, or the allies having been hindered, were lenti, were slow. Our participle is this guy. It's a perfect passive participle modifying boy. Notice the ISD here. The NE means it's a question. did you see? The boy having been killed? Innocent T, present active participle. We ought to kill the attacking enemies. Our participle is here, going all the way back there. It's a perfect passive participle. The girl found the head. Of the soldier. Having been placed in the river. Our participle is there. It's a present active participle, the NT. He gave help to the girl dragging the body out of the river. Now, this is something that's not new in the sense of we've been doing it over the last few days. It is a very, very common grammatical construction in Latin called the ablative absolute. And this is when you have a noun and a participle in the ablative case. Ablative, ablative case, ablative absolute. And it's only seen really with the perfect passive participle and the present active participle. And most frequently it's sectioned off by commas because it's its own dependent clause. Now, this first one, present active participle, you have a present active participle here. You have a noun in the ablative. You have a participle in the ablative. How do you translate an ablative? By or with. How do you translate a present active participle? Blanking. So the translation, the common translation isn't going to change. So rege, with the king, NT, ruling. Now, you can translate it while the king was ruling. Either works. But if you need to fall back on something, fall back on the grammar and translating that you know. With for ablative and blanking for the participle. For the perfect passive participle, same deal. It's ablative, so translate it with a perfect passive participle having been blanked. So in this instance, with his son having been killed. Now, you see several other translations. A common NLE translation is after the blank has been blanked or after the blank had been blanked or because or since. But this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy are going to be the most common ones. So, if you don't feel comfortable saying while the king was, or while the blank was blanking, or with the blank having been blanked, fall back on what you know. Ablative is translated as with. Present active participles, blanking. Perfect passive participles, having been blanked. And we've done this a few times already. So here's our perfect passive participle with a, or here's our ablative absolute with a present active participle with the enemy approaching, or not approaching, attacking. I'm all sorts of wrong on this one. Or you can say while the enemy was attacking. The soldiers prepared to defend the city Here's a... Oh, it's going to start doing that. Ablative absolute. And this is with a perfect passive participle. With the body having been placed in the river, or after the body had been placed in the river, the boy attempted to flee or escape. Here's our ablative absolute with a perfect passive participle. With the law having been written, the people were non-yam, no longer able to kill the citizens ablative absolute with a present active participle. With the captive leading, or while the captive was leading. The soldiers found the way or road to the city. Ablative absolute with a perfect passive participle. With the king having been captured. The queen was conquered. Not is conquered. 2 words, so it's got to be happening in the past. But in addition to that, the fourth principal part in the present form of sum is going to be perfect passive. And then the last one with a perfect passive participle. With the monster having been killed. The citizens of the city were happy. All right, so you got your perfect passive and present active participles. You now have ablative absolute, and we'll continue to work with this.